welcome to Haunted Midnight. I upload true stories every week on my channel, so if you enjoy this video, check out my other videos. Before we begin, over 90% of you are not subscribed. It would be amazing if you guys can subscribe and support me, as I am still a small channel. Thank you for watching. I met someone on a dating app and decided to give it a shot. One date couldn't hurt, right? We met at a cozy, dimly lit bar, the kind of place that made conversations feel effortless. They were polite, had a friendly smile, and we chatted about music, odd workplace stories, and random interests. It was pleasant but lacking that undeniable spark. By the end of the night, I thanked them for the evening and let them know I didn't think we were a match. They nodded, smiling as if they had expected it. I left, thinking that was the end of it. Weeks passed, life went on, and I barely thought about that date again. Then, small things began happening. Things I might not have noticed if they weren't so persistent. It started with Instagram. Every time I posted a story, an anonymous, generic-looking account would view it. At first, I dismissed it. After all, random people lurk on social media all the time. But this one, it was always there. No matter what I posted, it showed up, watching silently. Then came something harder to ignore. A car. Specifically, a car that looked exactly like the one my date had driven. I started seeing it near my apartment, parked on my street when I got home, appearing in the background when I was walking to the gym. At first, I told myself it was just a coincidence. It wasn't an uncommon car, and I had no real reason to assume it was theirs. But the more I noticed it, the harder it became to shake the uneasy feeling that it wasn't random at all. Things escalated subtly but unmistakably. Strange comments appeared on my social media, on posts and replies to stories. They weren't overtly creepy, just off. They sounded too personal, too familiar, like someone who knew me well. A post about a past trip brought a comment referencing an obscure detail of the place, something I had barely remembered myself. At first, I thought they were from bots or casual followers, but the consistency made it clear that someone was watching. Eventually, the pattern became impossible to ignore. The same anonymous account watching my stories. The car that seemed to linger near my usual routes. The eerily specific comments that suggested someone had been paying close attention to my life. It all pointed back to one person, my date. I had been polite. I had clearly said I wasn't interested. So why did it feel like they hadn't let go? At night, I found myself lying awake, scrolling through my social media, scanning for more signs that they were still there. Every time I saw that account pop up, a wave of unease washed over me. I started altering my routines, taking different routes home, double-checking my surroundings. I even considered confronting them, sending a message to ask outright if they were behind the strange activity. But every time I thought about it, I hesitated. What if that made things worse? Instead, I took precautions. I tightened my privacy settings, blocked unfamiliar accounts, and told a few close friends what was going on. I changed small aspects of my daily life to make myself harder to track. But even with those steps, the feeling of being watched didn't go away. Maybe it was all an overreaction. Maybe I was letting paranoia get the best of me. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just in my head. The little signs, subtle yet persistent, confirmed that someone hadn't quite let go of a single forgettable date. In the end, the experience became a lesson in digital vulnerability. We live in a world where connections, even brief ones, can leave behind unexpected echoes. A polite rejection should have been the end of the story. Instead, it became a slow, creeping reminder of how easily someone can blur the line between interest and obsession. Now, every time I open Instagram or step outside, I can't shake the feeling that someone might still be watching from a distance, waiting, lingering just out of sight. I went on a date with someone who, from the moment I saw them, sparked an unsettling familiarity deep inside me. I wasn't sure if it was just a trick of the light or a memory resurfacing, but their presence was oddly reminiscent of someone I had lost touch with years ago. The evening had started off like any other first date. Awkward introductions, shared laughter over clumsy attempts at small talk, and a series of gentle questions that slowly peeled back the layers of who we were. But as the conversation deepened, every detail they mentioned about their past, their interests, Even their childhood quirks struck chords that were all too familiar. I tried to convince myself it was pure coincidence at first. I had recently been thinking about my old friend, someone who vanished without a trace one summer afternoon. The friend I once knew, with the same crooked smile and the way they get lost in the story, was something I believed I would never see again. Yet here I was, sitting across from a person whose life narrative was a perfect match to the one I had once shared intimate memories of. They described growing up in the same small town, attending the same quirky little school, and even mentioned peculiar habits that I had spent years reminiscing about with this missing friend. Each detail felt like a jigsaw puzzle snapping into place, forming a picture that I had long ago thought was gone forever. As the night wore on, I found myself growing more and more unsettled. I was torn between the joy of reconnecting with someone so familiar and the creeping dread of what this encounter might actually mean. The restaurant was dimly lit, the background hum of conversations blending with the soft clink of cutlery, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that time itself was warping around us. I watched their eyes as they recounted a childhood memory, and for a fleeting moment, I could almost see the face of my old friend looking back at me. The realization hit me hard. I was dating someone who wasn't just reminiscent of my lost friend, but might actually be them. In a moment of nervous vulnerability, I broached the subject. I mentioned how their story seemed to echo every memory I had of someone who had once been an essential part of my life. I explained that the details were too specific, too vivid, to be mere coincidence. Instead of the reaction I expected, a pause, a nervous laugh, maybe even a denial, they just smiled warmly. That smile, calm and almost otherworldly, sent shivers down my spine. In a quiet tone, without any trace of anxiety, they said, "Maybe I never really left." At that moment, my mind spun with confusion and disbelief. I recalled every conversation, every shared secret with my old friend. I had imagined the possibility of them coming back in a dream or in a random chance encounter, but never in such a surreal and intimate setting. The words echoed in my ears as I tried to process the layers of meaning behind them. It was as if this person was challenging my understanding of absence and presence, of loss and continuity. Their calm delivery made it hard to know whether I was being pranked by my own mind or if something unexplainable was indeed happening before me. As we continued talking, I found myself asking questions, quiet, hesitant inquiries about the past, about memories that only my long-missing friend would know. Every answer was filled with a mixture of reassurance and mystery. They spoke of a life lived in the shadows of forgotten memories, of moments that slipped away into the past only to resurface in the most unexpected of places. I began to feel as though I were caught in a limbo between the world I knew and one that was inexplicably altered by this reunion. The restaurant's atmosphere became a surreal stage where time and reality blurred, and I felt like I was part of a story that defied logical explanation. I left the date that night with more questions than answers. The encounter left an indelible mark on my mind, and I spent countless sleepless nights trying to reconcile what I had experienced. I combed through old photos, revisited long-forgotten conversations, and even reached out to mutual acquaintances in hopes of finding some clue. Every piece of evidence pointed towards the undeniable truth that this person was, in fact, the friend I had lost so many years ago. Yet, no one could confirm what had happened. My friend had simply disappeared, leaving behind an echo of memories that now seemed to be living on in someone else. Days turned into weeks as I struggled with my conflicting emotions. Part of me wanted to believe that my friend had somehow found a way to return, that this was a miracle of fate or a quirk of destiny. Another part of me feared that I was descending into a fantasy where grief and longing blurred the lines between reality and imagination. I kept replaying our conversation in my head, trying to extract meaning from that enigmatic smile and those cryptic words. What did it mean to never really leave? Had they been watching over me all this time, or was this some twisted trick of fate designed to torment me with the ghost of what once was? I eventually mustered the courage to meet them again, hoping that further conversation might shed light on the mysteries that haunted me. Our subsequent encounters were filled with quiet intensity and moments of unspoken understanding. Each meeting was a mix of warm nostalgia and a lingering sense of something unresolved. We visited places that held echoes of the past, and with every step, I felt as if I was retracing the footsteps of my lost friend. The more time we spent together, the more the lines between memory and reality blurred. I couldn't help but wonder if I was falling for a shadow of the past or if my friend had somehow come back to life in a form I couldn't quite comprehend. Now, I live with a constant undercurrent of uncertainty. I am drawn to this person with a blend of hope and trepidation, haunted by the beauty and the sorrow of a past that refuses to fade away. My life has taken on a surreal quality, one where the present is inextricably linked to a past that I thought was gone forever. The phrase, "maybe I never really left," lingers in my mind, a constant reminder that sometimes the people we lose may never be truly gone, but rather transformed in ways that defy explanation. Every day is a delicate dance between holding on to memories and embracing the reality of the present. I still don't have all the answers, and perhaps I never will. But in this strange and unexpected reunion, I have found a peculiar comfort, a sense that some bonds, no matter how elusive, are too strong to ever be broken. The mystery remains unsolved, and I continue to navigate the uncertain terrain of rediscovered connection, where every familiar smile carries with it the promise that the past might just be a part of our present. I was really enjoying the early stages of this new relationship. After a few dates, I began noticing something odd about the way Alex, or whatever name I had given them in my head, seemed to know so much about me. It started with small details, things I assumed I had casually mentioned once in passing. I recalled one evening when we were sitting in a dim little restaurant talking about our childhood memories. Out of nowhere, Alex mentioned the name of my childhood pet, a scruffy little dog I had cherished even though I hadn't thought about it in years. I was taken aback. I didn't remember ever bringing up Toby in any of our conversations. I shrugged it off as a lucky guess, or maybe a detail I'd inadvertently let slip, but it was just the beginning. On our next date, when I was relaxing in a cozy coffee shop and sharing stories about my early school days, Alex casually brought up the name of the elementary school I attended. It wasn't a famous institution or anything that would have been easy to track down from social media. It was just a local, run-down school where I'd spent a few unremarkable years. I felt a jolt of unease. How could someone I'd met online know such a specific piece of my past when I'd never mentioned it? The mystery deepened further when, during a quiet evening walk in the park, Alex mentioned my old home address. I froze in my tracks, heart pounding, trying to piece together how they could possibly know where I used to live, a fact I had always guarded as a private detail. At first, I thought it was a case of a remarkably good internet search. Maybe Alex was just really thorough. But the more dates we had, the more these uncanny coincidences piled up. It wasn't just that they remembered trivial details. It was as if they had an entire dossier on my life, even parts I'd locked away in my own memory. I felt a creeping paranoia that made it hard to enjoy the moments we were supposed to be savoring. My mind raced with possibilities. Was this just some quirky way of showing affection? Or was it something more sinister, like they were stalking me online before we even met? One evening, after another seemingly normal date at a quiet, out-of-the-way bar, I decided I needed answers. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay when it felt like someone had been watching my life without my permission. As we sat on a bench outside after the bar had closed, I broached the subject. I asked, in as gentle a tone as I could manage, how they knew so much about me. I remembered feeling my pulse quicken as I looked up at them, searching their eyes for any sign of mischief or regret. Instead of a defensive reaction or an awkward silence, Alex just laughed. It was a warm, almost familiar laugh, but it didn't quite fit the situation. Then, with a mischievous twinkle in their eyes, they said something that would haunt me for days. "I've known you much longer than you think." There was no elaboration, no further explanation, just that cryptic statement hanging in the cold night air between us. In that moment, everything seemed to shift. I couldn't decide if I was relieved that there was a reason for all the peculiar details, or if I was stepping into something far more disturbing. I spent the rest of the evening in a daze, trying to process the revelation. My mind reeled with questions. Could it be that Alex was not who they appeared to be? Was this some sort of elaborate prank, or was there something supernatural about the connection we shared? I didn't know whether to laugh it off or to be deeply, irrationally frightened. The days that followed were a whirlwind of introspection and anxiety. I found myself re-examining every moment we'd spent together, trying to pinpoint the exact moment when the conversation shifted from normal to something that felt almost otherworldly. I dug through old messages, looking for clues, but nothing could explain how someone could possess intimate knowledge of my past without my ever having shared it. I began to wonder if I was simply projecting my own desires for a deeper connection onto Alex's words, or if perhaps I was experiencing something that defied the logical boundaries of time and memory. I started to do some research on similar experiences, reading stories about people who encountered doppelgangers, soulmates, or even ghosts who lingered in human form. There were plenty of urban legends and theories about reincarnation or long-forgotten connections between souls, but nothing that directly matched what I was experiencing. Still, the idea that maybe I was connected to Alex in a way that transcended the normal boundaries of time was both terrifying and strangely comforting. Every detail of our dates now took on a double meaning. The way Alex smiled, the little pauses in their speech, the way their eyes seemed to flicker with unspoken secrets. As I began to open up more to Alex about my past, the parts I'd always kept hidden, I noticed they reacted with an intimacy that was both tender and eerily knowing. It was as if they had lived my life before me, as if they were retracing steps that I'd long since forgotten. At times, I felt a bittersweet nostalgia, as if I were reconnecting with a part of myself that had been lost. But the more I revealed, the more unsettled I became. Was this person really a former friend who had vanished from my life years ago? Or was it something else entirely, a stranger with an uncanny ability to unlock my most guarded memories? One afternoon, as we sat together in a park near a pond, watching the light dance on the water, I brought up the subject again, cautiously probing for more information. I asked them to tell me about the first time they met me. Their response was both vague and haunting. They talked about moments that seemed to exist outside of any conventional timeline, referring to shared experiences that I could barely remember, but felt impossibly significant. It was as if they were drawing on a history that I wasn't aware I had, a parallel timeline that intertwined with my own in inexplicable ways. The conversation eventually drifted into silence, and I was left with a lingering uncertainty about what Alex's words truly meant. Were they a figment of my imagination, a manifestation of my own desperate need to reconnect with someone I'd lost? Or was Alex a harbinger of something deeper, a reminder that the past is never truly gone, but rather hidden in the folds of our memories, waiting to resurface when we least expect it? I couldn't decide, and the ambiguity gnawed at me every day. Despite the confusion and growing unease, I couldn't help but feel a magnetic pull toward Alex. There was an undeniable allure in their mystery, a promise of answers that were just within reach if I could only follow the thread of their words. I found myself meeting them again, each encounter peeling back another layer of the enigma that was our connection. Every shared laugh, every quiet moment of understanding, added to the tapestry of what seemed like a fate written long before we ever met. Even now, I still wonder about that fateful night when Alex laughed and revealed that they'd known me for far longer than I believed. The memory of that moment is etched into my mind, a turning point that altered the course of my life in ways I'm still trying to comprehend. I've learned to live with the uncertainty, to accept that some mysteries might never be fully unraveled. Instead of seeking definitive answers, I've started to appreciate the strange beauty of our inexplicable connection. It's a reminder that life is full of surprises, some delightful, others unsettling, and that sometimes the truth isn't as important as the journey of discovery itself. There are still nights when I lie awake, replaying our conversations and wondering about the life Alex claimed to have lived before we met. I wonder if they are truly the person I thought I lost, or if there's something else entirely, a part of me that has somehow slipped through the cracks of time. Whatever the truth may be, one thing remains clear: my life will never be the same. The inexplicable familiarity, the uncanny knowledge of my most private details, has left an indelible mark on my soul. And even though I might never get a complete explanation, I've come to accept that some mysteries are meant to remain unsolved, their secrets woven into the fabric of who we are. I was enjoying what I thought was a pleasant evening out at a small, dimly lit bistro downtown, a place known for its eclectic decor and relaxed atmosphere. I had met someone online whose profile exuded a blend of mystery and warmth, and our conversation over text had been promising enough to set a date. As I sat across from them, the conversation flowed easily, punctuated by light laughter and curious glances that hinted at a deeper connection. Yet beneath that veneer of casual ease, there was an undercurrent of unease I couldn't quite shake. About halfway through the meal, when the topics shifted from favorite travel memories to the small, almost mundane details of everyday life, the moment came that sent a chill down my spine. Without any preamble, my date referred to me by a name that was completely foreign. It wasn't a subtle slip or a momentary lapse in memory. It was as if they had consciously chosen a name that didn't belong to me. I felt a moment of disorientation, as if the very air around me had shifted, and I was now living someone else's narrative. In that instant, my heart raced, and a rush of questions flooded my mind about who this person really was. I corrected them gently, explaining that the name they used wasn't mine. They paused and then laughed in a nervous, almost apologetic way that didn't quite reach their eyes. They said something like, "Sorry, I keep forgetting who you are today," as if my identity was a mutable trait that could change with each encounter. That sentence, casual as it might have sounded in any other context, struck me as deeply unsettling. It wasn't just a simple mistake or a case of confused memory. It felt like a deliberate, calculated choice to obscure the truth of who I was, or perhaps who they thought I was supposed to be. The rest of the date unfolded in a haze of cognitive dissonance. I found myself struggling to reconcile the charming persona I had come to know with this bizarre moment of identity dislocation. I began to wonder if this was some sort of sick joke or an elaborate attempt to unnerve me. I replayed the incident over and over in my head, each time searching for clues that might explain the anomaly. Had I met them before, under different circumstances, or was I mistaken about the fact that this was our first meeting? Every time my mind tried to cling to a rational explanation, it slipped away into a realm that felt increasingly surreal. After that awkward moment, the conversation took on a tentative quality, as if we were both trying to steer away from that unsettling juncture without really addressing it. My date continued to ask questions about my life, but now every detail felt charged with an inexplicable significance. When they mentioned things about my childhood or subtle preferences I'd casually mentioned, it was as though they were cherry-picking details to build a puzzle that I couldn't quite understand. There were fleeting moments when I caught a glimpse of something in their eyes, a flash of recognition or maybe remorse, that quickly vanished before I could decipher its meaning. The rest of the evening was punctuated by a series of small, disconcerting moments. While we were sharing dessert, they commented on how my smile reminded them of someone they once knew, someone whose memory was both cherished and painful. That comment, which might have been flattering in another context, sent my mind spiraling into darker territory. I recalled fragments of my past, people who had left indelible marks on my life, and wondered if perhaps this date was connected to a past that I'd long thought was locked away. There was a sense that this person wasn't merely an interested stranger, but someone who had been following a thread through my life, a thread that I wasn't even aware existed. When the bell arrived and we prepared to leave, I felt a growing compulsion to understand the enigma that had unfolded during the meal. I decided to ask them directly about the name mix-up, trying to frame my curiosity as something casual rather than confrontational. They hesitated before replying, their gaze darting briefly as if searching for something in the depths of my eyes. Their explanation was vague, filled with contradictory hints that left me more puzzled than before. They mentioned vague ideas about how sometimes people are connected in ways that defy logic, and that names might not be as fixed as we assume. The more they talked, the more I felt as if I were caught in the middle of a strange riddle, a riddle that pointed to something about my own past, a secret perhaps I had locked away and forgotten. In the days that followed, I found myself obsessively retracing every detail of that evening. I scored through old messages and revisited memories, trying to piece together any indication that I had ever been known by a different name. Nothing added up. I spoke with a few mutual friends, people who could confirm that I had always been the person they knew and that I had never mentioned an alternate identity. The discrepancy gnawed at me, haunting me in quiet moments and disturbing my sleep at night. I began to question not only the authenticity of the person I had just met, but also the possibility that there was a part of my own history that I had forgotten, a shadow lingering behind the familiar outlines of my life. With each passing day, I felt a mounting tension as if I were being drawn into a labyrinth of half-remembered truths and twisted realities. My date's offhand remark had evolved in my mind into a symbol of everything I couldn't control: the inexplicable gaps in memory, the silent assumptions that everyone carries about who we are. I started noticing odd coincidences. People referring to me by names I never recognized, subtle hints in conversations that suggested a hidden identity, and moments when my reflection in a window or a mirror seemed to betray a person I wasn't expecting to see. The world felt as if it were conspiring to blur the lines between who I was and who I might have been. I reached out to the person again, hoping that another meeting might shed light on the mystery. Our next encounter was filled with a tentative optimism on my part, tempered by a lingering fear of what new revelations might surface. I tried to engage in light conversation, steering clear of topics that might trigger another awkward misnaming. Yet, even in moments of casual laughter and shared stories, there was an undercurrent of tension, an unspoken question about identity that hung between us like a thick fog. I sensed that my date was equally unsettled by the unresolved mystery, their eyes betraying a quiet anxiety that mirrored my own. Eventually, as our interactions continued, I began to realize that I might never get a definitive answer. The enigma of the alternate name, the peculiar comment about forgetting who I was today, seemed to be part of a larger tapestry of inexplicable coincidences that defied rational explanation. It was as if our encounter had unlocked a door to a hidden corridor of my past, one that was filled with half-truths, forgotten memories, and a sense of connection that I wasn't sure I wanted to explore further. In the end, I decided to step back and let the mystery remain unsolved. I couldn't shake the feeling that there were forces at play beyond my understanding, forces that thrived in the shadows of memory and identity. The experience left me with a deep, lingering uncertainty about how well we truly know ourselves and whether the person reflected in the mirror is as fixed as we assume. Even now, as I recall that unsettling evening, I feel a chill run down my spine every time I hear my own name, wondering if it's really mine or just another name in a story that I have yet to fully understand. I had been dating Jamie for a few weeks, and everything seemed to be going perfectly. Our conversations were effortless, and there was a warmth to the way they made me feel, like I was finally in the presence of someone who truly understood me. So when Jamie invited me over to their place, I was excited yet a bit nervous. I spent the day getting ready, choosing an outfit that was casual yet put together, and imagining what the evening might bring. When I arrived at Jamie's apartment, it struck me as charming. A tidy space filled with soft lighting, and an eclectic mix of vintage and modern decor. The air smelled faintly of cedar and something else I couldn't quite place, like old books. We settled in the living room, chatting about our days while sipping on wine and sharing stories about our childhoods. At first, nothing felt out of the ordinary, but as the evening progressed, a small unsettling sound began to intrude on the calm. It was a quiet rustling noise coming from somewhere near the closet. At first, I thought it was just the sound of the wind or maybe the settling of the building. I tried to ignore it, focusing on Jamie's easy smile and the way they laughed at my jokes. But the rustling persisted, growing slightly louder as if something, or someone, was moving behind the closet door. I couldn't help but glance in that direction, my curiosity mingling with a growing sense of unease. Unable to keep the question to myself any longer, I casually asked, "Hey, what's that noise coming from your closet?" Jamie's reaction was what made my skin crawl. They simply shrugged, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, and said, "Oh, that's just my roommate." Their tone was light and nonchalant, but something about it didn't sit right with me. I glanced at the closet door. It was closed and locked, with no hint of a keyhole or any sign of tampering. I asked again, a bit more firmly this time, "Your roommate? But I haven't seen anyone around, and that door is locked." Jamie just gave another awkward shrug and a quick laugh, as if dismissing my concern was the easiest thing in the world. The explanation left me feeling more unsettled than before. I spent the rest of the evening trying to enjoy our conversation, but the mystery of the locked closet and the mysterious roommate hovered over me like a dark cloud. I couldn't shake the image of that door standing silently closed, while somewhere behind it, faint sounds of movement continued unabated. I told myself that maybe it was just an odd living arrangement, a quirk of Jamie's that had nothing to do with anything sinister. But as the night went on, my mind kept circling back to that locked closet. Over the next few days, I found it increasingly difficult to focus on anything other than that unexplained detail. I texted Jamie a few times, trying to casually bring up the subject again. But every time they deflected with vague comments about living arrangements and how busy life was. I even asked mutual friends if they knew anything about a roommate, but they all insisted that Jamie had always lived alone, or at least that's what they believed. The more I tried to rationalize it, the more it felt like a scene from a horror movie, one where the familiar becomes a source of dread. My curiosity soon turned to a gnawing paranoia. I began to wonder if there was something in Jamie's past they were trying to hide, or if maybe I had stumbled into a situation that was far more complicated than a simple living arrangement. I started noticing other small inconsistencies too, strange gaps in Jamie's stories, moments when their eyes seemed to dart away as if avoiding something. I'd catch myself wondering if there were secret rooms in their apartment that I hadn't been allowed to see, or if the locked closet was just the tip of a much larger mystery. One night, I decided to return to Jamie's apartment. I told myself that I needed to see it for myself, to try and put my racing thoughts to rest. I arrived under the guise of wanting to help Jamie with some errands around the place, hoping that I might get a glimpse of whatever was behind that door. The evening started off as usual. We chatted, laughed, and even cooked a simple dinner together. Yet, as the night wore on, the familiar sound of rustling began again, coming from the same locked closet. I couldn't help but feel my pulse quicken as I tried to gauge whether Jamie noticed the noise. They seemed completely at ease, barely glancing in the direction of the door. After a while, I mustered the courage to bring it up one more time. I asked in a soft, almost hesitant tone, "Jamie, could you show me who's in there? I'm still curious about your roommate." There was a pause, a moment when the room felt charged with tension. Jamie's face shifted ever so slightly, the light in their eyes dimming for just a second before they forced a smile. "I really wouldn't recommend it," they replied, a note of caution in their voice that I hadn't heard before. It was then that I realized my initial curiosity had evolved into something much darker, a sense of foreboding that I couldn't shake off. I didn't press the matter further that night, but I couldn't ignore the feeling that something was terribly amiss. Over the next few days, I noticed even more odd behavior from Jamie. They became more guarded, their previously relaxed demeanor replaced by a subtle defensiveness whenever I mentioned the locked closet or the idea of a roommate. I began to wonder if I was overreacting, if perhaps the explanation was something benign after all. But deep down, I knew that the more I looked for answers, the deeper I would find myself tangled in a web of unsettling secrets. Eventually, I made the difficult decision to confront Jamie about everything. I arranged to meet them in a quiet park, away from the confines of their apartment. In the calm of the evening, I laid out my concerns, explaining how the locked closet, the mysterious rustling, and the claim of an unseen roommate had been eating away at me. I asked plainly if there was something I should know, something about their life that they had been keeping hidden. Jamie listened, their face an impassive mask for a few moments, before sighing heavily. They admitted that there were parts of their past they preferred to keep private, insisting that it was nothing I needed to worry about. Their words were vague and unconvincing, and I couldn't shake the feeling that they were dancing around the truth. The conversation ended with no clear resolution, leaving me with more questions than answers. I left the park feeling torn between the warmth I once felt for Jamie and a growing unease that now defined every memory of our time together. I couldn't help but replay the sound of that locked closet in my mind, the quiet rustling echoing like a warning that something was not as it seemed. Was it simply a clever excuse to mask a troubled past, or was it evidence of something far more disturbing lurking behind the door? In the weeks that followed, our relationship began to unravel. The mystery of the closet became a chasm between us, an ever-present reminder that there were secrets Jamie was not willing to share, no matter how much I cared. The trust that had once been the foundation of our connection slowly eroded, replaced by doubt and fear. I eventually had to accept that some mysteries are better left unsolved, even if they haunt you long after the truth has been left in the dark. Looking back now, I realize that the locked closet wasn't just a quirky detail in an otherwise normal apartment. It was a symbol of all the hidden parts of Jamie's life, and perhaps of our relationship too. It was a constant reminder that there are things we might never understand, secrets that remain locked away even when we're desperate to uncover them. And while I sometimes wonder what was really behind that door, I also know that I made the right choice in walking away from a mystery that could only lead to more pain and uncertainty. Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed this video, check out the video on screen.